Good morning, everyone. My name is Gordon Griffith, and I am the Executive Director of CMOS. As a visitor on this land, I would like to begin by acknowledging that I'm located on the traditional and unceded territory of three Indigenous communities, Anishinaabe, Mohawk, and Algonquin. I invite everyone to reflect on the Indigenous community you are located. I am the Executive Director of CMOS. And wherever you're located on this great Turtle Island, unceded territory of three Indigenous communities. Bienvenue à toutes et à tous au Congrès 2024 de la Société canadienne de la météorologie et de l'oceanographie. Welcome, everyone, to the CMOS Congress 2024. I want to mention a couple of important upcoming events before introducing our first guest. Later this week, on Wednesday evening, June 5th, the CMOS Awards ceremony will be held virtually. We will begin by honoring the recipients of the Fishery and Oceans Parsons Medal, the Meteorological Services of Canada Patterson Medal, the CMOS Undergraduate Scholarships, and the CMOS Awards and Prizes. The ceremony will begin by honoring those members of the science community who have passed. And the second one, l'Assemblée générale annuelle de la SCMO se tiendra virtuellement le 20 juin 2024. Our annual general meeting will be held virtually on June 20th, 2024. This is a Thursday, and the agenda and everything is on our website. J'ai maintenant le plaisir de présenter le président de la SCMO pour lui souhaiter la bienvenue, Serge Desjardins. We'll start in the east. Serge is located in Halifax. Take it away, Serge.
Merci, vous m'entendez bien? Oui. I would like to, dear CMOS member, guests and friends of CMOS, chers membres de la SCMO, invités et amis de la SCMO. And I would like to particularly say hello to Dan, Ferry, and Kavi, which are the three attendants that I can see now. C'est avec joie et anticipation que je vous souhaite la bienvenue à ce 58e congrès de la SCMO. Vous serez d'accord avec moi que son principal thème, événement extrême dans un climat changeant, est bien à propos dans ces temps-ci, et je suis sûr que les nombreuses présentations couvrant ce principal thème vous éclaireront plus sur ces enjeux mondiaux pour notre humanité et l'île planète, au milieu de ce vaste univers que nous habitons, la Terre. It is with joy and anticipation that I welcome you to the 50th CMOS Congress. I'm sure you will agree that its main theme of extreme event in a changing climate is very timely in this year, and I am sure that the many presentations covering this main theme will enlighten your future on this you further on this global issue for our humanity and the island planet in the middle of the vast universe we inhabit, the Earth. It was with this in mind that to be mindful of our carbon footprint, to minimize financial costs for organizers and partners participating in the Congress, and all this at the time when the COVID-19 pandemic has upset the normality of many things, that the decision was taken 2 years ago to alternate our congresses from face-to-face to virtual over a 2-year cycle. The hybrid version was tested last year with mixed success, and this year it's the first post-COVID virtual Congress by choice and not by obligation, as was our very first Congress organized by the Vancouver Centre in 2021. Donc c'est un peu à travers cette mentalité-là économique et écologique et qui a suivi la COVID qu'on a décidé de faire un cycle à tous les 2 ans qu'on ferait un congrès virtuel, et l'année d'après, on ferait un congrès en personne et ou hybride. On reverra ça probablement lors de la GA si c'est une bonne idée, mais il faut toujours garder en tête que c'est pourquoi on a pris cette décision. Il y a un côté économique et il y a un côté écologique aussi. Ce congrès est aussi une première dans son organisation. En effet, deux centres, soit celui de Winnipeg et celui de Colombie-Britannique intérieure et Yukon, ont réuni les ressources pour organiser ce congrès. Et par ricochet, cette opération leur a appris à mieux se connaître et s'entraider. C'est aussi cela, la CMO. This congress is also a first in its own organization. In fact, two centers, Winnipeg and BC Interior and Yukon, have pooled their resources to organize this conference, and this cooperation has enabled them to get to know and help each other better. That's what CMOS is also about. Whatever its format, it's here, and you're now at the door of this 4-day CMOS Congress, which we hope will enrich your knowledge and in your own and or related field and enable you to network with your peers. Donc, le congrès va s'ouvrir très bientôt et on espère que vous profiterez de toutes les présentations pour enrichir vos connaissances et aussi être capable de réseauter avec vos pairs. Many thanks to the Congress organizer, to the author who have submitted sessions and abstract, to our plenary speaker, and to you who will be attending. Un très grand merci pour votre participation. And finally, mark your calendar for the AGM on June 20th. It's an important NGM because we'll be talking a lot about our society and the changes we need to make within it to increase our impact vis-à-vis both you, the members, and the public. Donc, l'Assemblée générale annuelle aura lieu le 20 juin et ce sera important parce qu'on discutera de l'avenir de notre société. Donc, je vous donne rendez-vous. Bon congrès à tout le monde, especially Dan Ferry, Jafari Karas, and Kevin.
Merci, Serge. It's now my pleasure to introduce Pat McCarthy, the chair of the Local Arrangements Committee. Moving west, Pat is located in Winnipeg.
Okay, well, thanks, Gordon, and welcome everyone. As Serge mentioned, the Local Arrangements Committee for this Congress is made up of two smaller CMOS centers, the BC Interior and Yukon Center and the Winnipeg Center. So while our two teams met virtually, it was, as Serge mentioned, a great way to get to know our CMOS colleagues. So I'm very proud of the work that our all volunteer team did for this Congress. As a special shout out to our Science Program Committee, they're the ones who effectively handled the core of this Congress, and I truly appreciate the hard work that they put into that. I also want to thank the sponsors, in particular our major sponsors, which included Environment and Climate Change Canada and CNC SCORE. We had as mentioned already, we have an excellent group of plenary speakers, and don't forget that later today we're having a terrific public talk, so I hope you all can attend that. I'd also like to acknowledge the significant support that we had from the National Executive, Gordon Chiglau, as well as the technical expertise of agenda managers. And finally, I'd just like to read a couple excerpts from some of the messages we got for our Congress. And the first one is from the Premier of Manitoba, which is Wab Kinew, and he writes, the work being done by scientists and other professionals involved in CMOS is critical to our fight against the climate crisis. I want to offer my sincere gratitude to each one of you for your efforts in research and creating innovative solutions. And I'd also like to do just an excerpt from British Columbia Premier David Eadie's note. And there he mentions, it is imperative that our efforts to combat climate change are guided by reliable data, and sound science. And we are fortunate to have skilled professionals with us with this expertise working alongside us. Thank you all for the critical work that you do. And with that, I'd like to thank everyone for coming out and continuing to do, and hopefully that you can continue your great work in the future. I'm going to pass it back to Gordon.
Thank you very much, Pat. Now it's my pleasure to introduce Peter Jackson. He's the chair of the Scientific Program Committee. Finally, moving all the way west, Peter is located in Prince George.
Thanks, Gordon. Bonjour à tous. Je m'appelle Peter Jackson, président du comité du programme scientifique. Bienvenue au 58e Congrès de la SCMO. Welcome, everyone, to CMOS Congress 2024. We have a very exciting scientific program with oral sessions and poster presentations that reflect the theme, which is apropos of extreme events in a changing climate, as well as the full range of scientific topics represented by CMOS, from physical oceanography to meteorology and the atmospheric sciences. Highlighting and opening each day, we have some very exciting plenary and public speakers, starting today with Laura Twidle from CatIQ, speaking about the impact of severe weather catastrophes on Canada and the insurance industry. Bookending today's scientific sessions is the public presentation by Dr. Ruby Leung of Pacific Northwest National Lab, speaking on past and future changes in extreme weather events. On Tuesday in the plenary, we open with Dr. Myrtle Ballard from the University of Calgary, speaking about Indigenous science and people's knowledge of the weather and climate. Wednesday's plenary is by Dr. Peter Galbraith of Fisheries and Oceans Canada, who will tell us about the Gulf of St. Lawrence undergoing warming conditions and extreme events. Our final plenary is on Thursday by Dr. David Matthew Hall of NCAR and now of NVIDIA, who will be telling us about the use of AI, artificial intelligence, to tackle extreme events in a changing climate. Each day, our sessions are organized into 3 90-minute blocks in 4 concurrent sessions. Attendees will view the presentations as you are now through the Event Mobi platform. Presenters and session chairs will share their screens using Zoom. The detailed schedule with timing is available on the CMOS website. I encourage you to look there to plan your participation in Congress. We will try to stick to the schedule as much as possible to facilitate moving between concurrent sessions. So we will try to stick to the 30 or 15-minute blocks each presenter has been assigned. The poster session follows the plenary on Wednesday. The posters are already up on the Event Mobi platform. Many of them have 2-minute video introductions, as well as the full poster as a PDF. During the poster session, poster presenters will have been asked to provide a link to a personal Zoom or Teams meeting that the attendees can join during that 90-minute session to discuss the poster with the authors. I'd like to thank all the members of the Scientific Program Committee, as well as the session conveners, for their work in organizing the scientific program. We simply wouldn't have a program without them. I'd also like to thank CMOS staff, Gordon Griffith, the Executive Director, and Ching Liao, who is the master of the CMOS database. Finally, I'd like to also thank Lynn Buckley and the team at Agenda Managers, including Wendy, Colin, and Allison, for making the virtual Congress work. I hope you enjoy and benefit from Congress 2024. Profitez du Congrès 2024. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Peter. So that ends our opening ceremonies, and I'll look forward to introducing Stephen Deary, who will introduce our first plenary speaker.
Good morning, Gordon. I was just wondering if John was going first with the introduction.
And I wonder too if we should not wait until the appointed time, 8 o'clock Pacific time, before we start the plenary. Perhaps we should pause, everyone, and we'll start the plenary in 14 minutes to keep to our schedule, if that's all right. So maybe we can put up the slide for the plenary session while we're waiting for the appointed time to start, and then John, the chair, can join us by that time as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, everyone. We'll start again in about 13 minutes.
Morning, everybody. Okay, by my clock, it's 10 a.m. Central Time, so I think we should probably begin with the plenary session. So thanks everybody for attending this morning's plenary talk. I'm John Hanasak from the University of Manitoba, acting as plenary chair this morning. So thank you all once again for attending. I'll do the introduction in English, followed by Stephen Derry from UNBC, who was kind to do the same in French. I can rest assure you, no one wants to hear me destroy the elegant French language. So I'll leave it to Steph to do that. So I just like to first begin by acknowledging the Indigenous peoples of all the lands that we're on today. From coast to coast to coast, we acknowledge the ancestral and unceded territory of all Inuit, Métis, and First Nations people that call this land our home. So without further ado, this morning's talk will be delivered by Laura Twidle, titled Hailstorms and Tornadoes and Floods, oh my. So I'm sure it'll be fascinating to talk. So Laura is the president and CEO at Catastrophe Indices and Quantification Inc, or CAT-IQ as it's known, Canada's loss and exposure indices provider. Laura is a meteorologist that specializes in catastrophe forecasting and providing stakeholders with knowledge and tools to make informed decisions. She has a BSc in meteorology from Central Michigan University and MSc from McGill University. Her talk will be roughly about 45 to 50 minutes, I guess, and we'll leave about 10 to 15 minutes for questions. So I guess if you're ready, Laura, I guess we can have you share your screen.
And John, maybe I could do the introduction in French.
Sorry. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, thank you, John. Bonjour à vous tous et bienvenue à cette première session plénière du congrès CMOS 2024. Je suis Stéphane Derry de UNBC à Prince-Georges sur le territoire ancestral de la Première Nation Clé-Clétonais. Et aujourd'hui, nous reconnaissons tous les peuples autochtones et leurs territoires ancestraux et non cédés à travers le pays. J'ai le plaisir d'introduire aujourd'hui notre conférencière, c'est Laura Twidle, qui va faire une présentation qui est intitulée « Tempête de grêle, tornades et inondations ». So I'll leave it up to Laura to take over for the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Steph. Sorry about that.
No worries.
I think I have everything up. You can hear me and slides are there, hopefully.
Yeah, I think we're good to go.
Perfect. Okay. Well, thank you everyone for joining and taking the time out of your day to listen to me talk, hopefully not ramble. I am known for that. And thank you to the CMOS committee for the invitation. I wasn't meant to be the first one of the conference, so hopefully I don't let everybody down and I do it justice. But in any case, I hope you enjoy it, and I think there'll be plenty of time for questions at the end if you have any. So I will just start it off now. Okay, so as John so pointedly mentioned, we go by CAT-IQ because Catastrophe Indices and Quantification Incorporated, a perils company, is quite long. And what we are is Canada's insured loss and exposure indices provider. So not that you need to know fully what that means, but just to give you some background why it's relevant and to why I'm here, is that we are data collectors. In particular, we collect loss and exposure data from the insurance companies in Canada. Loss being the most relevant here, where loss is like the claims data after a severe weather event. But it also doesn't have to be severe weather that we collect data from. It's after wildfires, earthquake, could even be terrorism or something like that, or explosions. So to give you the most relevant bits of insurance to help you understand this presentation, and I promise it's not going to be like reading the insurance packet, if anybody has ever actually done that. So just so that you know, generally speaking, what's included in your insurance policy, be it your comprehensive car coverage or home or business, is fire, and It doesn't have to be strictly due to a wildfire. It can be from a stove or, barbecue or something like that. It's just fire. Next one, wind. Again, doesn't really matter what kind of wind or how it occurred. It could be tornadic, could be, more of a large scale system that causes damage. And so that's covered as well. And that final icon is hail. So that's also pretty well generally covered in your policy. And so the add-on bits are more insurance companies might have it, but it's not necessarily automatically included. And they might be available to you, they might not be available to you based on the region you're in. So that first one is just heavy rainfall. So causing things like sewer backup. So when the roads get flooded, goes into the sewers and then they overflow and then go back into your house and push that gross sewage water up through into your basement. That for the most part, companies do offer this now. And it's something that you might want to have. The next one being overland flood or storm surge. Storm surge isn't quite offered across the board from all the companies in Canada now, but overland flood is becoming more common, and I'll talk a little bit more about where the industry and the government is headed on that front starting next year. That is not a broken heart. Next, that is a heart-shaped piece of the earth. There was no earthquake icon, so that is earthquake. And again, it's an add-on if it's available to you. Again, if you don't know, we have two large areas of concern for earthquake in the country, out in the east, in the Quebec area, and out in the west in the Cascadia subduction zone. And then volcanic eruption. My colleague always says, like, it's shocking how many insurers say or offer volcanic eruption in Canada. And actually, it could even tip more into the included row there. Most just put it in into the policies. So I'm sure I've all bored you now. And as a meteorologist, it may sound boring from this point of view, but it's like I find it quite interesting because it's not just everyday weather we're talking about. We're talking about all of the extreme events. So just to add a little bit of background on myself, like many of you here, you are meteorologists. Probably also, like many of you, if you say you're a meteorologist, people assume that you're in broadcasting because what other purpose would a meteorologist serve? And straight out of my master's, I spent time forecasting for many different types of clients across Canada. I even got to call snow days in Atlantic Canada, but that was actually more terrifying than working with insurance companies because snow days is like, can the school bus with a bunch of children in it handle the whiteout conditions coming? So this is more fun in my opinion. But now in my current role, I only have to care about extreme weather. Maybe not this extreme, but unlike many here, I am a meteorologist within the insurance industry, though I do know there's a few meteorologists from the industry that are attending CMOS as well. So let's think about this photo from an insurer's perspective. Those pancakes could cause a roof collapse. Those meatballs could dent cars, knock out power. Ice cream, when it melts, could cause puddles that cause basement seepage. So basically, this is an insurer's nightmare, though I would suspect a nightmare for most. And if there's significant property damage from an event, the industry would call this a catastrophe. Though I don't think they would have modeled severe food weather in any case, so maybe it wouldn't be covered. I digress. Okay, so a catastrophe, or a CAT, I'll probably call it through the rest of the presentation, is an event that causes at least 30 million of insured loss. It affects multiple policyholders, so policyholders being somebody who has insurance and they have their house or their car or something like that, and multiple insurers. So we're not looking to capture a single disaster that impacts like one tall commercial building in a downtown. It's got to impact many to be considered an industry cat. It does not mean a kitty cat. So We're most often noted for impactful events. So what we do is collect the insured loss data from participating insurers across Canada. We aggregate that data and extrapolate to the industry-wide totals. So we're able to say this event caused this much loss. And one of the big ones we get a lot of media about every year is in January, we release where the previous year stood with respect to our history. So the latest one being in 2023, we had the fourth worst NatCat year for insured loss, NatCat being natural catastrophe. So if I show you the top 5 loss years, just so you can see where 2023 truly stood, we've got 2016 in first place, 2013 behind by quite a bit, 2022 in third, and 2023 just behind, 2020 in fifth. I'm actually curious to see when we reassess the insured loss estimates for each event throughout the year. And so when they come up to the year estimate date, we'll update the information. So it's possible that 2023 could cross that threshold. I guess we'll have to see after the summer. But let's look a little bit closer about last year. So 2023 was the 4th costliest year. However, that year stood out because of the sheer number of catastrophes, 24 catastrophes. And to add some context to this single data point that I've just thrown at you, in July and August of last year, there were 16 cats. Prior to last year, the most catastrophes we had ever seen in a single year was 15. So in 2 months last year, we had more cats than we've ever had in a full year. 24 catastrophes shattered the annual record. And while the industry does call the summer cat season due to severe events in the prairies, 2023 took this to a whole other level. And so what I'm going to show you next is some of the most impactful events from 2023. So the first impactful event, and I believe it was the 3rd cat of the year, came in early April when there was an ice storm that swept across Ontario and Quebec. There were also early season thunderstorms in southern Ontario. Rainfall amounts in southwestern and south central Ontario topped 50 millimeters for the day on April 5th, flooding basements, fields, streets, backyards. A little bit further east, ice built up on surfaces amid 9 and 12 hours of continuous freezing rain in Ottawa and Montreal. Ice accretion amounts totaled 30 to 37 millimeters in Montreal and up to 30 millimeters in the Outaouais region, coating trees, power lines, and outdoor surfaces. Of course, things start to fall under the weight of the ice. And by the morning of April 6th, 1.1 million Hydro-Quebec customers were without power. And on the Ontario side of the border, Ottawa Hydro and Hydro One combined reported 175,000 customers in the dark. Outages in Quebec persisted through April 11th, so 5 days later, when 19,000 customers were still waiting for power to be restored. Not so nice when it's still cold. This amounted to 350 million. And again, everything I say is insured loss. So economic loss, when you include everything else, would be a higher number. Nearly 2 months later, and actually I believe this was at the start of CMOS last year, a major wildfire sparked just outside of Halifax and caught everyone off guard. The so-called Tantalin wildfire ignited May 28th near communities on the northwest side of Halifax and went on to spread over 950 hectares before it was declared under control on June 4th. More than 16,000 residents in the area were subject to evacuation orders by late on May 29th. At least 151 homes and 50 other structures, including businesses, were impacted by the fire. This was 250 million. Now, important to note, insured loss data is not strictly just the damage it does. When we have events where there's evacuation orders, like flooding or fires, and people are forced to leave their homes. They have to go live in hotels, possibly buy some clothes, and that's called like the non-physical damage of insured loss. So if you have insurance, home insurance or something like that, you would have in your policy likely this additional fund to live elsewhere for a certain amount of time. So that loss also gets included in this number. On July 13th, so skipping a little over a month here, a system brought storms to Ontario and Quebec. Some of these storms generated the most damaging tornadoes of the year in Barrhaven, south of Ottawa, where 2 EF1 tornadoes ripped apart roofs and drove lumber through walls. There was also significant flash flooding in Montreal. This was over 220 million. On July 15th, so 2 days later, a swath of storms rolled off the foothills and pelted the region from Edson to Calgary with very large hail. This was at 180 million. At the same time as another catastrophe happening in Ontario and Quebec. That one was just over a measly 100 million. Over in the Maritimes, we had a short-lived train of thunderstorms which drew in tropical moisture directly to Nova Scotia on July 21st. Sparked tremendous flooding from Shelburne to Halifax and onto the Northumberland Strait, where more than 200 millimeters of rain fell in some of the hardest hit areas. A provincial state of emergency was declared due to significant damage to infrastructure and flooding of homes and businesses. This was over 230 million. The cats kept coming in August. I would say usually the severe storm tap kind of turns off after the August long weekend, but they kept coming this past year. And the month started with another severe convective event in southern Ontario and southwestern Quebec on August 3rd, pelting the Kawarthas with hail the size of billiard balls and causing further flooding in Montreal. That one was 130 million. The Gross Complex, or the Kelowna wildfire, spread explosively, prompting widespread evacuations on both sides of Okanagan Lake in mid-August. Nearly 190 properties were damaged or destroyed. Mostly areas affected were West Kelowna, Kelowna, and Lake County. This was over 450 million. Just a few days later, the Bush Creek East wildfire began spreading through communities in North Shuswap, including Scotch Creek and Celista. Extensive damage was done to properties and communities north of Shuswap Lake, with more than 270 structures confirmed destroyed. This was over 210 million. And a few days later, southwestern Ontario received multiple rounds of some severe thunderstorms, drenching Windsor, Sarnia, and the Essex region between August 23rd and 25th. More than 200 millimeters of rain fell in some communities, causing extensive flooding. There was also tornadoes and hail to top it off. This photo is on the 402 highway that connects London, Ontario to the Michigan border. And this was 140 million. And it's hailiest summer on record, and the next day on August 24th, Manitoba saw another hit from severe weather. Northeastern Winnipeg was blasted with golf ball size hail and winds above 100 kilometers per hour. Flash flooding also swamped cars in parking lots. This was over 230 million. And the final impactful cat of 2023 was an atmospheric river-fueled storm, which brought heavy rain, snow, and gusty winds to Atlantic Canada and parts of Quebec from December 18th to 21st. More than 170,000 hydro customers were impacted. Large trees were downed and roofs were damaged as winds topped 100 kilometers per hour. There were nearly 250 homes evacuated in Quebec due to high water levels, and basements in Montreal's West Island were flooded. This was 120 million. So now all of the, we'll call them kitty cats, the events that they're still catastrophes but didn't quite make the cut for me to dive deep into them for that summary. We'll kick them off with the Eastern Canada cold snap. Didn't include it more because it's like a sleepy cat. It still caused over 150 million in losses, but it's more like pipes bursting and the ground was frozen when there was snow melt, so there was some basement seepage. But again, still over 150 million in losses. There were early spring thunderstorms in Ontario from March 31st to April 1st, which was over 35 million. Central Alberta flooding in mid-June, which was 40 million. Late June Ontario and Quebec storms, also over 30 million. Alberta and Saskatchewan Canada Day storms, almost 90 million. Quebec flooding in mid-July, which was 35 million. Southwestern Ontario and southern Quebec storms over 100 million. Prairie severe storms over 50 million. Late July, southern Ontario and southern Quebec storms 70 million. August Halifax flooding 30 million. Ottawa flash flooding over 80 million. Hay River wildfire in Northwest Territory, where the community of Enterprise was totally devastated, over 35 million. And Quebec Thanksgiving flooding 30 million. So 2023 truly was coast to coast, and something that this sector and other sectors haven't truly recovered from are supply chain issues and labor shortages. So when we have events simultaneously happening across the country, it puts a lot of strain on any resources, especially when we share a lot of that with the United States. And they were, of course, having their own severe season as well. So I showed you last year. Let's take a look quickly about the biggest events ever. I say in Canada since 1998, but again, this is insured loss data. So we're looking at those top 10 events for the insurance industry. And any number I provide in this one is adjusted for inflation, which does actually, if they were nominal, it flips some of the order, but these are adjusted. So number 10. Is the 2011 Slave Lake fire, which was 680 million in today's dollars. And from May 14th to 16th, 2011, 2 fires burned near the town of Slave Lake, Alberta, causing devastating destruction to the town and surrounding areas. 1/3 of the homes and businesses in Slave Lake were destroyed, 374 destroyed and 52 damaged, and another 59 properties were destroyed and 32 damaged in Lesser Slave River. Number 9. Calgary often gets expensive hailstorms, and on July 2nd of 2021, in the late afternoon and evening, strong thunderstorms rolled through the city, ended up causing 710 million. Where these storms produced large hail and torrential downpours, the region had been hot and dry for over a week, which made it difficult for the ground to soak up the rain. A particularly hard-hit area was southwestern Calgary, where golf ball-sized hail pelted homes and vehicles, and there was significant road flooding, which occurred in the city's midsection and the northeast, as well as sewer backups into basements and commercial buildings. Number 8, with inflation, this May 2018 windstorm cost 780 million. And on May 4th and 5th, strong wind gusts above 125 kilometers per hour led to widespread damage across southern Ontario and Quebec. The winds ripped shingles off roofs and down trees, which damaged vehicles, homes, and power lines. More than 300,000 customers in Ontario lost power, and in Quebec, more than 285,000. Number 7. Hurricane Fiona of 2022. This event, with inflation, is at 912 million. From September 23rd to 25th, Hurricane Fiona rocked Atlantic Canada. Fiona made landfall as a Category 2 hurricane strength post-tropical storm near Canso, Nova Scotia. The storm became one of the strongest on record for Canada. Extensive damage in the Maritimes, Newfoundland, and eastern Quebec from violent winds, torrential rainfall, large waves, and storm surge. And for a very short list of the impacts, Port aux Basques, Newfoundland, Cape Breton Island, and PEI were among the hardest hit locations. Hundreds of thousands of customers were affected by power outages. Notably, 95% of PEI was in the dark and 80% of Nova Scotia. Across Atlantic Canada, some power outages lasted well into October. In southwestern Newfoundland, at least 20 homes were washed into the ocean, including 1 fatality. Number 6, the 2013 Toronto flooding, which stands at 1.1 billion. On July 8th of 2013, torrential rain from slow-moving thunderstorms caused extensive flooding in the GTA, specifically in downtown Toronto. Number 5, the 2022 Ontario and Quebec derecho. And on May 21st of that year, everyone learned a new meteorological term, the derecho. There was extensive damage and extensive and widespread wind damage, significant power outages where more than 1 million hydro customers impacted. 4 transmission towers damaged near Ottawa, more than 1,400 hydro poles broken, 1,000 power lines downed. More than 27,000 homes in Ontario and Quebec were without power for at least 1 week afterwards. Hydro Ottawa reported that power was fully restored by June 13th, more than 3 weeks later. Our industry partners, the Northern Tornado Project, confirmed 5 tornadoes, most notably the EF2 tornado in Uxbridge, Ontario, which was estimated to have a maximum wind speed of 195 kilometers per hour. There was also an EF2 strength downburst in southern Ottawa, and the community of Clarence Rockland declared a local state of emergency. This event came in at 1.27 billion. Number 4, another Calgary event, which stands at 1.32 billion. And on the evening of Saturday, June 13th, 2020, severe thunderstorms formed along the foothills and tracked to the northeast. Hailstones up to grapefruit size pelted Ditchess, Alberta. Northeastern Calgary felt the force of tennis ball size hail, and large hail also fell in some other parts of southern Alberta. And it wasn't only the massive hail that caused damage, but heavy rainfall added salt to the wounds. Calgary received up to 60 millimeters from the storms and strong wind gusts across the region. The system then tracked into Saskatchewan on June 14th and brought softball-size hail to Brantspeth and led to flash flooding in Humboldt, where the mayor declared a local state of emergency. Number 3, 2013 Alberta floods, which stands at 1.99 billion today. On June 19th of 2013, a large system impacted southern Alberta with heavy rain, which led to substantial flooding. Over 24 towns declared local states of emergency. More than 1,000 kilometers of roads were damaged along the Bow and Elbow rivers. And in Calgary, over 4,000 businesses were affected and 3,000 buildings flooded. Number 2, the 1998 ice storm. So this comes in at 2.3 billion. This is not a Cat AQ number. Our database goes back to 2008. So this was information collected by the Insurance Bureau of Canada from other resources like reinsurers. But in any case, it's still number 2 for the country. And on January 4th, 1998, southern Quebec and eastern Ontario were pelted with up to 100 millimeters of freezing rain and ice pellets over 5 days. At its peak, 35 million Quebecers and more than 1 million Ontarians were without power. 30,000 utility poles fell and more than 1,000 giant hydro pylons crumpled. And number 1, the Fort McMurray wildfire in 2016, which is at 4.49 billion. On May 3rd, 2016, a wildfire with extreme fire behavior began to move towards Fort Mac and forced the evacuation of 88,000 people. By May 9th, the Premier of Alberta reported at least 2,400 structures had been lost in the fire. And then re-entry for the residents began on June 1st, almost a month after the evacuation order. Okay, so if we look at an annual loss graph, but I'm just charting in the white here what the top 10 events that I just showed you look like there. And I didn't want to go back to 1998 on the years, so I've just popped in 1998 ice storm there on the left as a star. So 2016 Fort McMurray taking up a large chunk. 2013 coming in second there with 2 large events, the Toronto floods and the Alberta floods. 2022 coming in third with the derecho and Hurricane Fiona, and then the other events making up the other little pieces there. Now, if we add in the rest of the annual cat loss data that we've got, where the light gray is the cat loss data from all the other smaller cats across the years. ALA is allocated loss adjustment expenses. You can choose to ignore it or think about it. It's basically a loss to the insurance companies. They have to pay out, or they have to pay people that do work for them, third-party companies that come in for adjusting. So often for the industry, we include it in these types of insured loss graphs. And then NE is a notable event. And at CatAQ, we also produce reports on smaller events. So our cat threshold is 30 million, but if it's just shy of that, we still probe the industry to determine if it will fall below that. And if it's just falling below it, it's still impactful. It just didn't cross that threshold. So it's an average number just popped on top there. But in any case, we can see that the years where we have the top 10 events, they take up a large portion of the insured loss for that year. 2016 Fort McMurray wildfire, well, more about 2/3 of the total loss. 2013 is almost the entire thing with 2 events. 2022, more than half with those 2 events. But then we look at 2023, and we don't have any large event, and yet we're sitting at number 4 of the entire database without any other large event. So this makes it a lot harder on the insurers to have a lot of smaller catastrophes. So to elaborate on this point, you may get comprehensive car coverage, home insurance, or business insurance. And should you look to make a claim, you pay a deductible, and the insurer will pay the rest, or whatever your policy limit is. Now, if the insurers receive a lot of claims, like they would after a catastrophe, this may trigger their own insurance, which is called reinsurance. And to explain this very crudely, they have their own terms and conditions, of course, with when they can use their reinsurance. And it could be a certain amount of claims over a 48-hour period, maybe over a 2-week period, certain threshold for losses, when they can then activate their reinsurance. Now, if the insurance companies get a lot of small cats through the year, this probably doesn't reach their reinsurance treaty threshold. So they take on the full cost of that. And if they have one big catastrophe, that's when that amount of claims fall in that specific time, and it can then be transferred over to reinsurance. So then the loss gets split across a larger portion of the insurance ecosystem, if you will. And then reinsurance also has the ability to protect themselves through something called retrocession or the capital markets with investors and that. But usually that's only something where it's a very large earthquake that happens, or a major hurricane, particularly in the US, where those types of events then go into retrocession. So hopefully by this point, I've painted a picture as to why the industry cares a lot about what the future of natural catastrophes looks like. More frequent events is not a great situation for the industry. And then, of course, what do those events look like? Wildfire, that's covered for insurance. So there's a lot of interest around drought. Of course, drought also impacts crop insurance. And I'm thinking about insurance, of course, like not having crops would be a big deal for other industries and other sectors. But and then with drought, if we get heavy rainfall after, we can get flash flooding, overland flooding in the spring, but even throughout the year, what does that look like? So there's a lot of questions that, the industry would love to look more into and are researching, in fact. But, for everybody on the meeting today, again, it's useful to have an idea of what other sectors are interested in. So what are changes in severe thunderstorms? We saw several on the top 10 list there that led to flash flooding and hailstorms. Are they becoming more intense? Is it changing location? Are they becoming more frequent? Ice storms, while they don't happen every year, or at least to a significant condition, are in the future, will we have more in specific areas, or maybe we'll have less? So those are the types of questions that we'd love to look more into. And so these increasing costs cannot be tackled by one person, one group, or solely the government. It's going to take a whole of society approach. There are a number of groups, Canada and the US, possibly internationally, that have concluded that for every $1 spent on reducing the risk of natural hazards, so mitigating, there is at least $5 of savings in the long term. And there's many organizations in Canada and beyond linked to the industry that are out to mitigate the impacts that we're already seeing from extreme events. and they didn't ask me to plug them here, but I'm just going to because they are phenomenal organizations. So the Institute for Catastrophic Loss Reduction, or ICLR, their Disaster Prevention and Research Communication Center based out of Western University. They also now have a spot in Winnipeg out of Wawanesa Insurance's new office. They do a lot of great work with builders, municipalities, and more. FireSmart Canada, it's a national program to help Canadians increase neighborhood resilience to wildfire. You can get your home assessed, your community can be recognized as a FireSmart community. And some insurers are even partnered to offer a premium discount if your home has been FireSmart certified. The Intact Center on Climate Adaptation, which is out of the University of Waterloo. They've got many programs across all types of perils, how to reduce wildfire risk, how to adapt during extreme heat events, flood programs as well. Even have this program for home inspectors when someone's buying a new property and the home inspector is now, if they've taken this workshop, now aware of what to look for to tell the homeowners that are moving in, might be doing renos, how they can put in these small retrofits to make your home less susceptible to flooding. Partners for Action, they're also based out of the University of Waterloo and funded mostly by an insurance company. They're a research initiative to empower Canadians to become flood resilient by promoting awareness and preparedness actions inclusive to evidence-based information. And a number of years ago, they did a study where they surveyed residents in floodplains, and the outcome was the residents did not know that they were at risk. So there's a huge piece on awareness that across the country, we need to become a lot better at providing that type of information. And finally, in partnership with the industry, the government is working on our country's very own national flood insurance program for high-risk properties. So we're not the first country to do this. US has their NFIP via FEMA. There's Plenary in the UK, and there are more countries that have this. The release date for Canada is set for 2025, which will be amazing if they're able to roll it out by then. But again, this needs to come from all levels of government, all types of industries, municipal, community, and the individual. So either we have to get creative on labor resources to support the recovery process, or we need to be able to adapt and mitigate to extreme events. There's a lot of work already done on that front, and we just need to start putting these into place. So how can we all move forward to increase awareness around resiliency to extreme events? Okay, I will end there. Thank you for your attention, and I'm happy to take questions if there's time.
Thanks very much, Laura. That was excellent overview of all the, I guess, the bad things that have been going on lately. It's unfortunately. So
Yes.
I think we do have some questions. I'm just trying to see where we there's some on the Amobi Q&A, I see. So I guess I can read off some of them. Let's see here. So there's one, I can't tell who actually asked the question, unfortunately, but so one question is, have you tried to determine how much of the increase in insurance losses can be attributed to increases in severe weather versus the increases caused by increasing population and property values?
So I personally have not gone through that, but at the very beginning of the presentation, I mentioned that we collect the exposure data as well. So while we have the loss piece, and so the exposure data being the total sums insured information, and to break that down further is the property values, how many homes are insured, and how much their value is, and that. So the data does exist, and you can see year over year when we update that exposure database where the exposures are increasing. The database, we only launched the exposure part in that with year-end 2016 data, so it's not like totally robust on the front that we have the losses at this point. But absolutely, there is a large correlation between increasing exposures to the extreme events that we're getting. As we create a bigger bullseye for these severe weather events to basically impact. And of course, we're not always building with adaptation in mind. It's just basically putting down concrete. I mean, municipalities, et cetera, might put in some storm drains and runoff areas, but I certainly think that we can, as a whole across all levels, do a better job of supporting the future of what that looks like. Our population will continue to grow, but to make a long story short here, I have not looked directly into it, but the data does exist for researching groups to be able to do that, at least back to 2016.
Okay, great. Good answer. There's a question that came from the Zoom chat here, looks like. So one is, I'm surprised that the 2021 BC floods didn't make the top 10 cut. Is it because no one gets insured against floods in the Fraser Valley, I guess is the question. So I guess it's all reliant on insurance that you're covering, right? So
yeah, so exactly in that second part of the question, you kind of hit that right on the nose there. So I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, our data is totally dependent on insurance coverage. And so overland flooded coverage is one of those add-on pieces. And while it's an add-on piece for those high-risk areas, sometimes companies will offer it, but of course, the premium might be higher because it's more susceptible to flooding, or it's not offered at all. So for overland flooding events, especially prior to, say, 2015, we don't get a lot of flooding events in the database because overland flood coverage just was not offered. It's now offered more, but it's still not 100%. And of course, not everybody's going to have home insurance. Not everybody's going to buy the add-on of flood coverage, which is why the National Flood Insurance Program that's set to be released next year is so important, because it's going to be this low-cost insurance program that the government will run in a partnership with the industry to help those high-risk properties.
interesting. So I guess some of this would have been discussed at the Cat IQ conference earlier in February too, right? So
yeah.
Okay, another question, if it's okay. So I believe the session goes till 11 a.m. I mean, we can obviously finish earlier, but I think that's the time limit we have for the plenary session. Another question, do you look at the geographic distribution of claims across Canada, or perhaps the ratio of claims to amounts insured? I don't know if that makes sense.
Okay, so with the geographic distribution, again, since we're tracking catastrophe data, there will be a strong bias towards where people live and where people are insured. So when there's even a moderate to cold snap that's happening, if you have a lot of properties in one area, you're more likely to get an insured loss catastrophe. So in terms of the geographic distribution, those would be totally skewed towards urban centers. And what was the second part of that question, John?
Just the time about the ratio of claims to amounts insured.
Okay, perhaps this, okay. So for some of the events, for the larger events and that we collect the data for, if they exceed 250 million, what we do is collect the data at a finer resolution. So it's the same resolution that we collect the exposure data at. So then you can compare directly alongside the intensity for the event at that specific area, and then you could take it offline and compare it with other weather metrics if you wanted to figure out vulnerability curves or something. But in like what we have available is mean damage ratio, which I think is what that's implying. So how intense is an event in a specific area, and then look at it versus the insured value. So yes, I am able to look at that, for events like the Fort McMurray wildfire, which is the first of those types of events we have collected at that resolution. The mean damage ratio is 100%. Because the fire destroyed everything in that specific area. And then we have up to, I think, the next one, which is like the 2020 Calgary hailstorm on June 13th of that year, that some of the auto losses in the region are 25% of the total insured values destroyed. So I don't know if that answers the questions, but yes, sometimes. And data exists to be able to do that for the impactful events.
Okay, great. Yeah, we still have a number of questions, so I hope you're okay answering these. It's very, very interesting topic, obviously. Is there an industry standard for estimating the non-insured losses? So that is there a standard multiplication factor to estimate total losses?
So it's not, we don't do this at CatIQ. I have heard mumblings that some academic groups are starting to look more seriously into doing this. Offhand, I know after the Fort McMurray wildfire, there was a study done, and it was basically like a factor, like multiply the insured loss by 3 to get the total economic loss. And I think for specific types of perils, based on if the coverage is offered in Canada or what the take-up rates are, what you would multiply the insured loss data by is a little bit different. But I believe there's groups that are starting to look more closely into that, but technically nothing to my knowledge is public yet.
Okay, great, thank you. Another one is weather services around the world, including the MSC, are transitioning to impact-based warnings. Are they working with CatIQ or CAT modelers as part of that initiative? I guess they're wondering if they're working with you folks or not.
Yeah, so we do have a partnership with Environment Canada, and I do know that some of those research groups on the impact side utilize the database.
Okay. Another is, since the majority of Canada's population is near the US border, is the northern US catastrophe data incorporated into your data? I suspect not, but I'll let you answer.
Yeah, we are strictly Canada, and then our parent company is also not US. But the US does have, oh gosh, and I don't know the name off the top of my head at the moment, but they do have their disaster database, which I think is public.
Yeah, I can't recall. Okay, let's see. Somebody's just mentioned great talk. It appears that the severe storms costs are shifting north and into Canada. Is there data in the US that have been used to assist this type of work? Or I guess, are you aware of that? Is this true, I guess, is the question.
That storms are like it's all shifting to the north?
Yeah, I guess that seems to be what the comment is, yeah.
Okay. I would say I haven't done any work around that. It would be really interesting. So if anybody's on that, John, you're in severe storms research. There you go. Topic for you. I haven't done anything specifically looking at if they've been migrating up. Again, a lot of storms, I mean, if they were moving into Saskatchewan and they've just crossed the border, it's unlikely that that will cross that $30 million threshold. So we wouldn't have data for those types of events. So I think somebody who's doing that research would have to have more of that recovering all of the storms kind of view. And maybe like the Northern Hail Project or the Northern Tornado Project is kind of, a good fit for something like that, because all the backfilling research they've been doing on where tornadoes have been occurring and in the past, and now keeping up with current.
Mhm. Yeah, so lots of work to be done, obviously, yeah. Okay, so maybe, let's see, there's one more here. So how representative is the insurance industry data, such as the top 10 events on overall societal impact? So would the top 10 societal impact events, if measurable, be the same or different, do you think?
I think there would definitely be some big changes in there. One of the questions off the beginning was about the 2021 BC floods, and I think that one would be probably number one, if not like in the top three easily based on economic loss. But just given the insured side of it, it didn't make the top 10. So for sure, there would be swings in terms of that.
Okay, I think I remember seeing a question about air quality. So I guess with all the wildfires and things like that going on, is there a way for Cat IQ to, I guess, monitor somehow maybe the insurance industry isn't involved too much with air quality impacts as much as physical damage to structures and things like that. So somebody was asking about air quality. How is that actually accounted for, or is there a way to account for it somehow?
Yeah, so there's at least two different sides to insurance. There's what they call the P&C, property and casualty side, which NatCat is on, and then there's the life and health side. I would say that's probably more of a life and health, something that maybe they track. So I am less involved with that. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so maybe this is another one. They keep popping up here. We discussed losses for the insurance industry, but it's unclear if these events were outside the industry's expected losses for this period. Were they, and how far off were these expectations from recorded losses? Kind of a long series of sentences. So does that, did you get that, Laura, or?
I heard it. I'm just trying to determine what the root of the question is.
Yeah.
So in terms if they were modeled?
Discuss losses for the insurance industry, but it's unclear if these events were outside the industry's expected losses for this period. Yeah, so I guess they're asking, were they, and how far off were these expectations from recorded losses? I guess you guys do modeling for actuaries will, they'll do modeling activities to try and project, using past history.
Yeah, so we provide the data for modelers to take it and run with it, to have a baseline. So in terms of what the insurance companies or the CAT modelers that are at the insurance companies or the model vendors, they would be the ones that would have that kind of information. Since we are independent from the insurance companies, we just collect their data and produce the industry-wide estimates. I am not often privy to that kind of information, but I'd say in any case, like 2023, where probably expect companies would model what their Calgary hailstorm exposure would be, and they have the baseline of 2020 where that one like really hit the city. And then 2021 was also a pretty big one there. So last year, in relatively speaking, was a smaller event. So they know that one they can handle, right? I think what doesn't quite get modeled or understood is how severe of a year it's going to be across the country. Like last year, we had it everywhere. In August, there was wildfires in the Northwest Territories and BC, but at the same time, Winnipeg got huge hailstorms. Southern Ontario was still getting hailstorms. We had flooding in southwestern Ontario. And then in early August, there was another Halifax flooding event and an Ottawa flooding event. Montreal was constantly flooded last year. And it's just all of those events that we haven't seen all happening simultaneously. So it's probably the challenge as opposed to, yes, they do model but model like what the event could cost, a single event could cost up to, but just the sheer number of events that there was is just less manageable.
Okay, great, thank you. So I think that's all the questions I've seen. So it's now 10:55 Central Time, so it's probably a good time to give maybe people a break. So thanks again, Laura. We really appreciate you taking the time and answering all the questions. So lots of really good questions. So we appreciate you taking the time to do this for us, and really interesting stuff. It's something for us to keep in mind looking in the future. So thank you again. And I think I believe the science sessions begin at in about 20 minutes or so, I believe. So I guess folks can join using the event Mobi. Presenters and session chairs should join with the appropriate Zoom links, I think. And so I guess we'll take a break until that time. I think it would be good for the session chairs and the presenters to maybe join maybe 11 a.m. or so, maybe 5 or so minutes, just so we can do a check for people's video and audio. Just make sure we're all set to go for 11. I guess 14. Yeah, it's 10:56 now, so a little more than 20 minutes from now. Okay, so yeah, so maybe like I said, presenters and session chairs, please join your appropriate Zoom links in about 5 or so minutes, and be sure everybody is ready to go. Okay, thanks everybody. Thanks again, Laura. We appreciate your time and your expertise.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks, John. Have a nice day.
Thank you.